The breakup of the Beatles, the most influential band in music history, was the result of a complex combination of events. These are the 5 determining facts. The death of their manager, Brian Epstein. The 4 Beatles had in Brian a very present father figure. He had been with the Beatles since Cavern Club days. It was him who got the first contract with Parlophone, even before George Martin met him in person. It was Brian who made them swap out better leather jackets for ultraline suits and made them stop drinking, smoking and even swearing on stage, making their shows extremely professional, valuing what they had best: repertoire, musical talent and charisma. All of the Beatles' business, from before Beatlemania to their resounding success, passed through Brian's careful and perfectionist hands. In 1967, while on a travel to discover the benefits of meditation, the Beatles were surprised by the news of Brian's death from an overdose of insomnia drugs. This was a very hard blow for all of them, both on the emotional and on the administrative sides, and that was reflected in the day-to-day of the band until the end in 1970. Overexposure and harassment. Beatlemania brought a lot of money and fame to the Beatles, but success in these proportions took a heavy toll on them. The Beatles spent a lot of time locked between themselves and their small staff because it was simply impossible, due to the fame they achieved, to maintain civilized communication or coexistence with the public. While still performing live, they could barely hear their instruments and their voices. And although they stopped with shows, their fame always endured, and the incessant and even sickening harassment bothered them forever. By breaking up with the Beatles, maybe they were trying to get rid of this karma, but history has shown that this would never happen. John was killed by a fan in 1980, and George was attacked by another who nearly killed him with a stab wound to the throat inside his own home in 1999. Influence of Yoko and drugs. Yoko Ono's constant presence at rehearsals and recording sessions bothered them. Some members of the band felt that it interfered with the dynamics and cohesion of the group. Until then, the recording sessions were a sacred and exclusive moment for those involved in the process. It really wasn't normal for John to go so far as to bring a bed into the studio for his girl to stay in. At this time, Joe was taking hard drugs. In addition to his creative absence and permanent highness, he lived a kind of obsession with Yoko, from whom he always expected an opinion. This addiction to drugs and Yoko's could not be positive in the eyes of his partners, since John had always been the leader with strong and important opinions that everyone resorted to and respected. John was walking away. Lack of space for personal compositions. The one who most felt the lack of space to exhibit and record his compositions was George Harrison. Competing with the 2 greatest composers in the history of popular music was no easy task. John and Paul dominated the repertoire because in the early years their compositions were indeed better. But as time went on, George was proving to be an accomplished songwriter and still couldn't match the number of songs the other 2 put on the albums. In the last years, this battle for space has generated a great deal of frustration in George, which is very evident in the recently released documentary Get Back, and which has made him increasingly want to leave the Beatles and play his way alone. This tension existed until the dissolution of the band, and as a consequence, most of the songs on his debut solo album, All Things Must Pass, came from a list of songs written in the Beatles era that were not used. All Things Must Pass had to be a triple LP and is still, to this day, the biggest commercial success of a former Beatle in a solo career. Business and financial disputes. After Brian Epstein's death, everything was a mess. Apple Corp., the company responsible for all the Beatles' business, was in an administrative and financial chaos. Paul McCartney wanted his father-in-law, Lee Eastman, a renowned New York lawyer, to start taking care of business. John didn't take kindly to this bond Paul had with Lee, and he personally found Lee too pompous. Thus, as an alternative, he appointed Alan Klein, manager of the Rolling Stones, who John believed, because he was a professional in the field, much more prepared to take over the management of Apple. John convinced George and Ringo to stand by him, and this dispute never resulted in a common agreement. Paul did not trust Klein and would never sign any papers accepting his command in the Beatles business. Publicly, the blame would fall on Paul's back. For all these reasons, the personal relationships between the band members were deteriorating. The dynamics of the group were changing and affecting the complicity and admiration that previously existed. Personal interest became a priority, something that had never happened. In September of 1969, John had already warned internally that he would leave the band, but in April of 1970, Paul made the official announcement of the dissolution. A sad moment for millions of fans who have come to dream of a comeback that never existed. The wonderful work of the Beatles stayed forever. If you enjoyed this video and like this channel, subscribe, leave a like, give me a suggestion about what story you wanna hear so I can always improve and bring you new and better videos.